Welcome to Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. I am Bradley, and I'm your service leader for the day. If you're with us on the internet, or if you're with us in the chairs around me, we are one community, united in our commitment to each other and our commitment to live out our principles in the world. As we begin today, I want to remind you to please silence your cell phones. I'm going to tell you all right now, this is a service that talks about death, talks about suicide, talks about assisted suicide, about anything related to that. If that's a touchy topic for you, you are welcome to, at any moment, do what you need to do. Whether that is to go to the bathroom, go outside, disassociate, that's okay. This is a very sensitive topic. I'm glad we're talking about it, though, because what makes it more sensitive and what makes it more uncomfortable is when we don't talk about it. Around 2006, my grandfather got prostate cancer for the second time, and he was in his 70s. He had it for decades, or he did not have it for decades, but for decades he would say that if he ever got a terminal illness like that he would kill himself. My family would shut him up and shut him down. Don't talk like that, don't say things like that. And then he got cancer for the second time in his 70s. He started getting thin. He now needed a wheelchair. I remember my mom crying over how bad he'd gotten. And my grandmother would watch him like a hawk to make sure he didn't do any funny business. But one day, she went to the grocery store for 10 minutes. She comes back to a note on the front door saying, "Do not open the door, call 911, call your brother." Never in my life did my grandmother ever do as she was told. She went in and saw him hanging in the hallway. When my mother told me and my sister what happened to Papa, I said something that shocked her. I said, "I don't blame him. He had cancer. He was old. He was going to die. But he didn't want to die in the slow and tragic way that cancer patients die. He wanted to die with some dignity. And you all wouldn't let him, and the state of Florida wouldn't let him." My mother and I argued about this for years on whether he did the right thing or not. And about a year ago, my mother finally agreed with me. But when we had that conversation again, she kept on repeating the same phrase. "I just wish it didn't happen like that. I just wish it didn't happen like that." And on that, we agree. It shouldn't happen like that. And that's why I'm happy Kevin Bradley is with us today as our guest speaker. Kevin has been with the Final Exit Network since 2016. The Final Exit Network provides educational resources and support for any mentally competent adult who is facing an unacceptable quality of life and wants to end life on their own terms. But first, let us light our chalice with our mission statement, which you can find in your bulletin. We work together as a church to transform ourselves, our community, and our world by sharing love, pursuing justice, and seeking wonder. There's a fact about me that my close friends are aware of that I would like to tell you all and the internet now. I'm a big fan of death. I like talking about funeral arrangements. I like talking about wills and estate plans. I like visiting cemeteries. I have people in my life who don't like talking about death. They don't like me bringing it up. Some of them think talking about it will invite it, like it's the devil or Lord Voldemort. I view these people the same way I view people who feel uncomfortable saying the word tampon. I have this look on my face like, this isn't some big secret we're trying to keep from everybody. It happens to everyone. I truly believe death hurts us so much when it happens because we don't talk about it enough. We won't even say the word died. We don't say my grandfather died. We say my grandfather passed away. There's such a fear of the reaper. And our special music today gives a different message. Don't fear the reaper.
Look out.
Come to this community with all that you are. Your joys and your concerns are welcome here. We share our moments of joys and sorrows with us through using these candle cards. If you're with us in person, or by emailing Reverend Tiffany at minister@hvuuc.org with the words candle card in the subject line. Please make sure to indicate whether or not you would like the card to be read aloud in the service, which is still being broadcast publicly on YouTube. I have a virtual card from Tom. Tom Burns is still in the ICU following heart surgery. Please continue to send him prayers and healing energy. He is at extremely high risk for infection and cannot have visitors. So please send your support from afar. Be assured, virtual hugs are real hugs. I have a candle or a card saying death of special needs kitten. Thoughts and prayers, please. I have a card from Rosemary. Concerned for Rosemary's dad, who has been in the hospital since Tuesday. He's holding his own and now just waiting for a bed at a rehab facility. Send out your positive vibes. Thank you. I have a card saying Nex Benedict was a 16-year-old non-binary teen who was killed as a result of the anti-trans legislature and hatred in their home state of Oklahoma. May they rest in power, and may their family and friends find justice and peace. February is Black History Month, and it just so happens that today is the day American boxer Muhammad Ali became the world heavyweight champion by knocking out Sonny Liston in 7 rounds. Muhammad Ali got in a lot of trouble for his refusal to serve in the Vietnam War, his reason being both religious and political. Religiously, he said, war is against the teachings of the Quran. I'm not trying to dodge the draft. We are not supposed to take part in no wars unless declared by Allah or the messenger. Politically, he said, why should they ask me to put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles from my home and drop bombs and bullets on brown people in Vietnam, while so-called Negro people in Louisville are treated like dogs and denied simple human rights? Black men would go over there and fight, but when they came home, they couldn't be served a hamburger. Ali was arrested. The New York State Athletic Commission suspended his boxing license, and the World Boxing Association stripped him of his title. At trial, he was found guilty. At the appellate court, he was found guilty. But the Supreme Court unanimously overturned his conviction. We light a candle to honor Ali's resistance towards violence and passion for justice. If you want a candle to be lit for yourself, a loved one, or a situation close to your heart, I will invite you to make that request by standing or by raising your hand. I will then acknowledge you with a motion of my hand, and then you may sit down or lower your hand after I acknowledge you. And we light our first candle for you who are not in the building, but are ever in our hearts and minds. Our reading today comes from a movie called Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. In the movie, the owner of the toy shop is going to die, and he gives this impassioned monologue to his best friend and successor to the toy shop, who is very upset about his passing. When King Lear dies in Act 5, do you know what Shakespeare has written? He's written, "He dies." That's all, nothing more. No fanfare, no metaphor, no brilliant final words. The culmination of the most influential work of dramatic literature is, he dies. It takes Shakespeare, a genius, to come up with "he dies." And yet, every time I read those two words, I find myself overwhelmed with dysphoria. And I know that it's only natural to be sad, but not because of the words "he dies," but because of the life we saw prior to the words. I've lived all 5 of my acts, and I'm not asking for you to be happy that I must go. I'm only asking that you turn the page, continue reading, and let the next story begin.
First of all, thank you so much for allowing us to share this wonderful space. And I have to say, I have spoken a lot of churches. I was a professional musician for a while and a choir director. I don't think I've ever been in a church where we had Abide With Me and the Reaper song in the same space. That's just turned my head around, but it's all good. So I'm going to fly through a little bit of a slideshow. A lot of it's going to be a teaser because I'm hoping you're going to come back. I'm going to have more information about what I'll be talking about. So we're going to get right into it. And the first question I have for you is, where do you want to die? Most people will say, at home. 80% of us will say, I want to die at home. Most of that will be preferably in my sleep. But what is the reality? Statistically, only 20% of us will actually die the way we want to. Another 20% will die in an assisted living facility of some kind. Now, that may be home to them, but it could also be plugged up with all kinds of wires and things that they don't necessarily want. The reality is that 60% of Americans die in some kind of an acute care situation like a hospital. The question I have for you is, why? The biggest reason is because we're not prepared to prevent it. Your options right now in America, you can refuse treatment. Even if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, you've got terminal whatever, you don't have to get treated. You can refuse treatment or you can discontinue treatment. This surprises some people because you may wake up in the hospital and go, what's this? I got things plugged into me. You can demand that they be removed even though everybody knows that doing so might result in your death. You can do voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. This is known as VSED, the acronym, and it's just what it sounds like. You starve yourself. Some people are advocates of this. I am not because I've seen it and it ain't pretty. For the first couple of days, you will be very uncomfortable. Third day, you're probably going into comatose and it's okay for you. But then your family gets to watch you die over the course of at least 10 days. There's a thing going around the country you may be aware of. It's not legal in Florida yet, in Tennessee yet. I was just in Florida. Minnesota, it's not legal. That's where we're from. But there is legislation in 20-some states to try to get medical aid in dying passed. And it's just what it sounds like. It is medical professional helping you die. They give you a medication that its sole purpose is to help you die. However, it has some very strict requirements. So for people who think, oh yes, I'll just do that, it's not quite that easy. First of all, you have to have a terminal illness. And let's say you were diagnosed with stage 2 cancer, but you don't want treatment. Maybe such as your grandfather? Yeah, maybe it's the second time around. My father died of lung cancer when I was 21. It went into remission and he came back and he said, I'm not doing that again. You've heard that many, many times. People who get treatment and then they say the treatment was worse than the disease. I'm done. However, for medical aid in dying, you have to be diagnosed as being within 6 months of the end of your life. The medical phrase that they use is something to the effect of, in my professional judgment, if this disease continues on its current course, this patient will die within 6 months. The reason for this definition is the legal definition for Medicare to kick in and for you to be eligible for hospice. That's where they came up with the 6 months. It's a prescription medication, which means you have to be able to swallow it. You got throat cancer, you may not qualify. If you're heavily sedated, it won't work because you have to take it yourself. There is a residency requirement in most states. So if you live in a state where it's not legal, but you want to go across the state line, they might refuse you because you're not a resident of that state. And lastly, you have to find a doctor who is willing to do it. And this is a kicker that I have discovered is not well known. Even if your doctor is willing to do it, they risk losing admitting privileges to a hospital if they do. So both the doctor and the facility has to approve it. A lot of people do not qualify. In fact, most people do not qualify for medical aid in dying. Another thing here is, on the left side, you will see a list of what we call degenerative neuromuscular diseases. Each of these will make your life perhaps very uncomfortable for you. But none of them are technically terminal because there's no way of knowing how long you can live with these things. On the right, on the bottom, you see it says cancer. You can be diagnosed with stage 2, stage 3 cancers. They're not necessarily terminal yet. You could actually be diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer of something, but it hasn't metastasized. For instance, you have a cancer of the eye. They'll just take your eye out. What if you have cancer of both eyes and they take both eyes out? Something to think about. People who don't qualify for medical aid in dying come to Final Exit Network. Our mission, which was alluded to earlier, we educate qualified individuals in practical, peaceful ways to end their lives. We offer a compassionate bedside presence if you choose, and we will defend your right to choose, which means our lawyers will fight for you in court. Our services include the Exit Guide program. That's the core of what we do. We also have a speakers bureau, which is why I'm here. We also have a surrogate consultant, and by that we mean we have somebody who will help you understand your rights as a patient or as the family of a patient. And lastly, up there, we have an advanced directive that is specifically for dementia. It is not uncommon for people to have a very well thought out advanced directive, but then they have dementia and they go to the hospital or their loved ones wants to fight for them, and their doctor will say, this doesn't apply anymore because you're not the same person because you have dementia. So we developed an advanced directive that takes that into account. And I will talk about the Speakers Bureau, the surrogate, and the advanced directive for dementia a little bit more this afternoon. But I want to touch a little bit on the Exit Guide program. I want to emphasize it does require some qualifications. You can't just say, oh, I broke up with my first boyfriend, I want to end it all. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. There is an application process. You have to have been diagnosed with some kind of a physical illness, and it has to be reviewed. We have a medical review committee. There is no requirement for Fed membership. We welcome members, but you do not have to be a member. It is free. Everything Final Exit Network does is absolutely free. We survive on donations primarily and bequests. And this is a key because we talked about assisted suicide. We do not assist. We do not provide any equipment, and we do not provide any physical assistance. What we provide is education, primarily education. Mostly, if you come to us and you are the client, we can be in a 2 or 3 year long conversations. We can come visit you. We can spend a lot of time, and some people might say invest a lot of time. But when the 11th hour comes, if you change your mind, that's fine. We have no investment in the outcome. We're just here to help. Now, I mentioned qualified individuals. This is a little bit wordy, but I want to key in a couple things. There's terminal illness, which we talked about earlier. One of the qualifications is if you have a terminal illness, but it doesn't have to be within the last 6 months. As I mentioned, stage 2 cancer, if left untreated, will eventually probably become terminal. But we also have intractable physical pain or chronic or progressive disabilities. And I talked about those in the slide earlier. You have Parkinson's or ALS. For example, ALS, if you know of anybody who's ever suffered from that, by the time they are within 6 months, they could never self-administer anything. So there's a window of opportunity. The founder of our organization, Derek Humphrey, coined the term, you may have to leave some good time on the table in order for you to control your own death. There are 3 groups who do not like me being here: the medical establishment, institutionalized religion, and the government. Why might the government? Well, actually, let's start with the medical institution. The key here is this is a chart showing the last year of a typical person's life. So on the far left, it shows about 3% of Medicare funds are spent at that point. Now, fast forward towards the end, the last 30 days, 40% of all Medicare spending is in the last month of life. Some people say, well, that's to be expected because you're getting old, you're dying. The problem is that some of the people in the last 30 days don't want it, but they can't speak for themselves because they weren't prepared. So, money. And now, I was a chaplain of a hospital and a hospice chaplain. I met very many fine people, especially the nurses. They don't get into that business for the money. But it's the people behind, it's the bean counters who are in it for the money. It's a business to them. Even if it's a nonprofit or public, they still have to keep the doors open. The next group there is the politician, and here's my standard joke. How can you tell he's lying? His mouth is open. So, the politicians will talk about the state's interest. And I'm just going to tease you with that because we're going to talk about that this afternoon. Then we have the clergy. As an ordained minister, former hospital chaplain and hospice chaplain, I got lots of questions, and I still do, about with religious objections. The 3 main ones are the 6th commandment, or they'll say that thwarts the will of God, or they'll say, but it's not biblical. I get to say, you're actually wrong about all of those. Let's talk. And I'll give you a little bit of a hint right now. How many of you, if you grew up like I did, learning this kind of stuff, how many of you were taught that it says thou shalt not kill? It doesn't. It says thou shalt not murder. Yep. And the difference is important because in the original Hebrew language, or now we call it actual Proto-Hebrew, murder is very specifically defined as the deliberate taking of another's life with malice. Suicide is not murder because it's not another person. So, how do you have a good death? How do you avoid coming home and finding your grandfather hanging? How do you avoid someone like Robin Williams? How do you avoid a lot of those things that we hear about? The best way to do it is to be prepared. Number 1 thing, make sure your affairs are in order. Make sure you have an advance directive or a living will. It's the same thing, just depends on where you live. Also, many people don't know how important it is that you have somebody assigned as a power of attorney. I personally witnessed in the ER a doctor ignoring advance directive because the date was too old according to hospital policies. You must have them together because the power of attorney is the person who stands in front of the doctor while you're on the table, probably sedated, and says, Doctor, this is my mother's directive. You will follow it or I will own this hospital in 6 months. That's what makes it work, is somebody standing there advocating for you. That's the key of a power of attorney. You must have both. Make sure you have beneficiaries on all of your accounts. If you happen to be married and you're in, I'm assuming Tennessee is a state where it automatically goes to your spouse. But that's not always the case, especially if you have a blended family. Lots of situations where the heirs are contested. The cleanest way to get around that is to have beneficiaries specifically listed on all of your accounts. Whoops, went too far. And also, make sure you know the difference between a co-owner and a co-signer. If you don't, we'll talk about that this afternoon. Write your own obituary. Have you ever done this or know anybody who's done this? I like to read the obituaries because I like to try to figure out which ones are written by the person themselves because they are hilarious. Write your own obituary. Have your family help you. I'll take one step further. Plan your own funeral. I gave this advice to my hospital patients, and some of my patients would say, "But chaplain, I'm just here to have my gallbladder taken out. Why do I have to worry about this?" Well, as you may or may not know, the most difficult part of a surgery is the anesthetic. Some people have not recovered from a simple gallbladder surgery. However, those patients and those families came back to me later. This advice was the advice I gave for which I was thanked most often, either by the patient or by the family. And I mean down to the last detail. We'll talk more about that later. Single most important thing, talk to your family. What do you want? Because so often, as we discussed, we live in a death-phobic society. When I'm not talking about Final Exit Network, I'm talking about green funerals or green burials. I'm talking about home funerals. I believe that we as a culture have lost a great deal by not caring for our loved ones when they die and after they die. And unfortunately, more and more people are in the city, children too, they don't see animals dying. That death is just not part of our conversation anymore, and I think we've lost a great deal. So, like Bradley, we could have a long conversation about how much we enjoy talking about death and dying. And I really like your comment about passing. There's a great George Carlin routine, by the way, about how we don't say they did. They've gone beyond. It's like, what? No, they died. Deal with it. It's part of life. How can you support Final Exit Network? You can invite people like me. When I started doing this, I was surprised to find out that although we thought our main job was to persuade people that what we do is okay, we found out that everybody already agreed with us. They had just never heard of us before. So the best thing you can do for us, and we think for the community at large, is to invite us to come and speak to your group. The one good thing to come out of the pandemic, Zoom. We now do many virtual presentations, and I'd be happy to set up a virtual presentation either with myself as a speaker or somebody else. It just happens to be that my much better half here, Melanie, is the coordinator of our Speakers Bureau, and she'll make sure that you get set up with the right person. So you could become a member, and you may have heard me say earlier that you don't have to be a member to take advantage of our services. So people say, well, then why do we want to become a member? Numbers. If a member of the press asks me about Final Exit Network, and this has happened, they say, oh, you have membership. Well, how many members? If I say, well, we've got 50, they'll go, oh, you're kind of nothing. But I can now say we have 3,000 paid members. Then they'll say, oh, can I write an article about you? That's why membership is important, and that's why I encourage you to become a member. As I mentioned, donations. We welcome donations. Although all of our services are free, we do live on our donations and our bequests. You can do a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA or 401k, and you can remember funding your estate planning. I hate talking about the money, but it's one of the questions that always comes up, so I want to make sure you know that you have lots of options if you want to support our work. And I want to point out that most of our donations don't come from members. They come from families of members that we help. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you just want to know more about us. That's our website, upper right, you click on subscribe. You can go on the left where it says services, you can click on Speakers Bureau, and that's where you can submit a request. We try to make it as easy as possible. A lot of different ways to stay in contact. And for those, especially for those of you at home today, I invite you to email us at info@finalexitnetwork.org. And for those of you who are able to stay for the presentation this afternoon, you can either do that or we have some paper. You can give us your email address and we'll follow up with you. Oh, and we have lots of handouts back there. So yes, and thank you for the reminder. We are having a presentation workshop this afternoon. It starts at 12:30. 12:30. We welcome you to come back. I will answer any and all questions. I will have a couple of these slides up there but a longer presentation. So some of these will be a repeat. But for example, we'll talk about what exactly does it mean, the state's interest. That always intrigued me. But we'll talk about planning your own funeral, and we'll talk exactly what Final Exit Network teaches. I will give you a little teaser. In order for us to approve a method of what we call self-deliverance, there's a euphemism for you, it has to be peaceful, painless, and absolutely certain. So, a lot of research went into it, and there is now a method that we recommend. And we will talk about that this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you for coming, Kevin. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and extinguish our chalice now. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we will carry in our hearts and share with all the world. A solid 7 seconds to kill that sucker. It was humane. It was humane. Thank you for being with us today. If you're interested in the Final Exit Network, we have papers and materials along that white counter. There are tons of stuff for you to grab. If you want them to contact you, there's also a contact list that you could write your information down, or you could go ahead and just search it yourself, finalexitnetwork.org. Don't type it into Google, because then Google's going to think you're going to try to kill yourself. Just type in the website, finalexitnetwork.org. Today is the last day to sign up for Wednesday night supper this month. We will start shopping tomorrow, and we hate to sound unwelcoming, but it's hard to make the right amount of food if people don't sign up. So please sign up today online or in the fellowship hall by the kiosk. Our Path to Membership classes are coming up. The first class is Sunday, March the 3rd. We will dedicate that class to understanding Unitarian Universalism and our covenant. The second class, which is Sunday, March the 10th, will be involved in sharing our spiritual journeys. Each class will run from 12:30 to 2:30. Childcare will be provided. These are both necessary classes to take to join the church. The number of participants will be limited, so sign up soon. Email membership@hvууc.org. There will also be a sign-up sheet on the side counter in the sanctuary. The Let's Chat Covenant Group is looking for new members. Previous sessions were praise and flattery, shame and scorn, joy, laughter, and the ever-present change. The topics are always varied and interesting. They meet on the second and the fourth Mondays at 6:30 to 8:30 in the res. We are still doing our pledge drive, where members write down ahead of time how much money they plan to give the church during the next fiscal year. If you haven't made a pledge yet, please email yours to stewardship@hvууc.org. We will now hear from Charlie. He's going to come up and talk about why he pledges to the church.
Hello, I'm Charlie Miller, as you mentioned. Just want to share why I pledged during the stewardship campaign and encourage everyone to do that. I'd like to say at its most basic level, I want to offer my fair share to a community that's become my home. I've built friendships and memories with most of you. My wife and I have worked alongside many of you for years to grow and sustain what has been built here, and we care about it. We want to make sure it's here for others as well. I also want to support our engagement with the local community so our liberal perspective is represented. This is one of the few places where I get to be completely authentic and it will be embraced. I can bring my children here, and they will not only hear messages that reinforce what they hear at home, but sometimes hear new ideas and make them think and ask good questions. I enjoy the exchange of ideas and perspectives, as well as camaraderie and fellowship. I love that our big tent makes space for smaller groups where we can engage those who share part of our identity. For me, that includes the Atheist Group and Macho, which have been a very important part of my experience here. I also love the committee work, where many of us get to express a particular talent and collaborate with others who value that contribution. It's also beautiful to experience those expressing a talent I do not have but value, such as our Music and Religious Services Committee. Our caring group is so special, and I want to extend a special thank you for their efforts. I valued the support they offered when my father passed last year, and the opportunity they organized to support others facing challenges and loss. I have personally witnessed the hard work and diligence that has been exercised to steward our budget and deliver maximum value for our contributions. This is why I can pledge with confidence to know it will go to what is most needed. Many of you have probably received a pledge form or had it emailed to you. Otherwise, we have some in the back as well. If you run into any questions, as you mentioned, you can email stewardship@hveuc.org or grab me if you see me. And Chelsea may be around somewhere. And of course, Greg, who's not here right now. But once you fill out the pledge form, you can put it in the offering plate, or you can mail it in, or you can call or email your what you want to pledge, whatever is most convenient for you. But I encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid and broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride!" Go in peace and make every moment count. Yay, church!